Have you ever felt a persistent, low-level hum of dread in your chest that seems to have no clear source? A constant state of waiting for the other shoe to drop even when things are going well? For children of narcissistic parents, anxiety isn't just an occasional feeling. It is a fundamental part of how your brain was programmed to perceive the world during your most formative years. You grew up in an environment where love was conditional, and the emotional atmosphere could shift from calm to storm in a matter of seconds, forcing you to develop a hyper-aware internal radar just to survive the day. This constant need to anticipate another person's volatile reactions created a blueprint of high-alert living that you still carry into your adult relationships, work, and even your moments of rest. Today, we are going to explore how that programming took root, and, more importantly, how you can begin to dismantle the wires of anxiety to finally find the internal safety you were always denied. The origin of this pain lies in a childhood where the emotional ground beneath your feet was never solid, leaving you to navigate a world of constant instability. As a child, you weren't allowed to simply exist. You were tasked with the impossible job of monitoring your mother's fluctuating moods to ensure your own safety and belonging. You internalized the idea that if you could just be perfect enough, quiet enough, or helpful enough, you could prevent the next emotional outburst or period of cold silence. This dynamic forced you to become an emotional caretaker long before you had the capacity to understand your own feelings, let alone someone else's. You learned that your primary value was tied to how well you could soothe the person who was supposed to be soothing you, creating a deep-seated belief that you are responsible for the emotional well-being of everyone around you. In this vacuum of consistent care, you became the stabilizer, sacrificing your own childhood curiosity for a rigid, defensive posture of hypervigilance. Eventually, this responsibility became a heavy mantle that you didn't even know you were wearing, shaping your identity around the needs of a parent who could never be truly satisfied. You grew up believing that peace was something you had to earn through constant effort, and that any lapse in your performance would lead to catastrophe. This original wound of instability is where your constant anxiety was born, a survival mechanism that protected you then, but is now keeping you trapped in a cycle of perpetual exhaustion. As the formation of role inversion took hold, the natural hierarchy of the family was flipped, placing the burden of the adult's emotional health onto your small shoulders. You became the parent to your parent, a process known as parentification that stripped away your right to be vulnerable or messy. You learned to read the air in a room the moment you walked in, deciphering the subtle cues of a tightened jaw or a sharp exhale to know exactly which version of yourself you needed to present. By becoming the stabilizer for your mother, you learned that your own needs were at best a distraction and at worst a threat to the family's fragile peace. You were trained to suppress your natural impulses, effectively silencing your own voice so that the narcissistic parent's needs could remain center stage. This inversion taught you that safety was found in self-neglect, a lesson that has made it almost impossible for you to prioritize yourself in adulthood without feeling a crushing sense of guilt. This role wasn't just a duty. It was a survival strategy that required you to be a master of observation and adaptation. You became so skilled at managing the environment that you lost touch with your own internal world, a disappearance of the self that served the parent but left you hollow. The constant pressure to be the emotional anchor for someone else meant that you never learned how to anchor yourself, leaving you drifting in a sea of anxiety whenever you aren't actively serving others. We can understand this survival response through the lens of hypervigilance, an instinctual state of high alert that your body adopted to keep you safe from emotional harm. While it may feel like a personality trait or a tendency toward overthinking, it is actually a deeply ingrained psychological mechanism designed to scan for threats. In a narcissistic home, the threat wasn't always physical. It was the threat of rejection, the withdrawal of love, or the sudden onset of a parent's rage. This hypervigilance means your nervous system is essentially stuck in a loop of fight or flight, even when there is no immediate danger present in your current life. You might find yourself overanalyzing a text message, worrying about a colleague's tone of voice, or feeling a sense of panic when things are actually going well. Your body is simply doing what it was programmed to do. Searching for the hidden trap that your childhood taught you was always there. Naming this response helps shift the perspective from "I am broken" to "I am a survivor who was conditioned to be this way." It allows you to see the anxiety not as a flaw in your character, but as a testament to how hard you worked to stay safe in an impossible situation. When you understand that this hyper-alertness was a necessary tool for your past, you can begin the slow process of teaching your body that it is finally safe to stand down in the present. In the process of identity formation, you likely developed a performer persona, a curated version of yourself designed to gain approval and minimize conflict. This masking was a form of self-disappearance where the real you, with all your authentic fears and desires, was tucked away in a secret place to avoid being judged or crushed. You became a master of being what was needed, appearing high-functioning and capable, while your internal world was crumbling under the weight of the performance. This performer identity is fueled by the fear that if you ever stop doing, if you ever just are, you will be found unworthy of love. You learned that love was a transaction based on your utility, leading to an adulthood where you feel you must constantly justify your existence through achievement or service. The anxiety you feel is the fear of the mask slipping, the terror that people will see the messy, human, and tired version of you that your mother could never accept. The tragedy of this identity is that while it kept you safe, it also kept you lonely, as no one was ever really connecting with the true you. You have spent so much time being the person you thought you had to be that you may not even know who you are without the performance. Healing involves the slow, often frightening process of removing the mask and realizing that your value is inherent, not something you have to manufacture for the benefit of others. Behind the competent adult exterior, there is a silent wound of the inner child who is still waiting for the permission to feel safe. This part of you still carries the unmet needs for protection, validation, and unconditional love that were sacrificed at the altar of your mother's narcissism. Every time you feel that familiar spike of anxiety, it is often that inner child crying out, sensing a threat, or remembering the times they were left to manage overwhelming emotions alone. The inner child remembers the silence of a house where their feelings didn't matter, and they carry that silence into your adult life as a fear of speaking up or taking up space. They are still looking for the caregiver who will say, "I have you, you are safe, and you don't have to fix this." Because those needs were never met in the past, they continue to drive your behaviors in the present, pushing you to over-explain, overwork, and over-apologize. Exploring this wound is not about living in the past, but about acknowledging the reality of what that child endured. It is about recognizing that the child within you is not a burden to be ignored, but a part of you that deserves the very care you have given so freely to everyone else. By turning toward this wound with compassion, you can begin to offer that child the security they never had, which is the only way to truly quiet the echoes of childhood anxiety. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the weight of what we are discussing and to remind you that your feelings are incredibly valid. If you find yourself nodding along or feeling a sense of relief in finally hearing these patterns named, I would love for you to share a small piece of your story with us. Please leave a comment below with the phrase, "I am learning to trust my own peace," so that we can support one another in this journey of reclamation. Seeing your words can be the spark that helps someone else feel less alone in their struggle, creating a community of healing for all of us who were taught to stay silent. In adulthood, these patterns of anxiety manifest as a profound difficulty with trust, both in others and in yourself. You might find it impossible to believe that someone could love you without wanting something in return, leading you to constantly look for hidden motives. Your self-worth becomes a fragile thing, easily shattered by a perceived slight or a small mistake, because you were never taught that you were allowed to be human. Rest feels dangerous to you because your programming equates being still with being unprotected or unproductive. Even on your days off, your mind is racing with lists of things you should be doing, an emotional regulation struggle that prevents you from ever truly recharging. You are living in a state of chronic responsibility, feeling that if you let go of the reins for even a second, your whole life will spiral out of control. These manifestations also appear in your relationships, where you might become a chronic people pleaser, or, conversely, push people away to avoid the vulnerability of needing them. You are constantly managing the perceptions of others, a strategy that leaves you feeling isolated even when you are surrounded by people. Understanding that these adult behaviors are actually echoes of your childhood survival kit is the first step in deciding which of them you are finally ready to put down. Biologically, your need for attachment was so powerful that your brain prioritized keeping a connection with your mother over developing your own authenticity. This emotional reasoning is a survival mechanism. A child who is rejected by their caregiver is in existential danger, so your system learned to sacrifice your true self to stay in her good graces. Your anxiety is the biological cost of that sacrifice, the alarm system that went off every time you dared to be yourself and risked her disapproval. This instinctual drive for attachment means that your body still reacts to the threat of conflict as if it were a threat to your very life. When you feel the urge to suppress your feelings or change your behavior to keep someone else happy, that is your biological programming at work. It is a deep-seated fear of abandonment that was etched into your nervous system during those years when you were completely dependent on a narcissistic parent for your survival. Healing requires us to recognize that while this sacrifice was necessary when you were a child, it is no longer required for your safety as an adult. You are now capable of surviving even if someone is unhappy with you, and you are capable of finding attachments that do not require you to disappear. By understanding the biological roots of your anxiety, you can begin to reassure your system that the danger is past and that your authenticity is finally a safe place to live. The deep consequences of this upbringing include long-term relational effects, where you might find yourself repeating the same painful dynamics with new people. Your internal narrative is often one of harsh self-criticism, a voice that echoes the conditional and judgmental tone of your mother. You have developed coping styles that are rooted in avoidance or perfectionism, both of which are designed to keep the crushing weight of shame at bay. These consequences can feel like a life sentence, but they are actually just the long shadows cast by a difficult past. The internal narrative that tells you that you are a burden or that you aren't doing enough is a lie that was told to you to keep you compliant. Recognizing that these thoughts are not your own, but are the leftovers of a narcissistic environment, allows you to start questioning their validity for the first time. By looking at the deep effects of your history, you can start to see why you struggle with things that seem easy for others, like setting a boundary or asking for help. You are not behind in life. You are simply recovering from a set of emotional conditions that most people will never have to face. This awareness is the beginning of your liberation, as you start to separate your true identity from the consequences of the trauma you endured. The first step toward true healing is the practice of awareness and witnessing, where you learn to observe your own patterns without the usual layer of self-judgment. It involves noticing the moment your anxiety spikes and saying to yourself, "I see that I am feeling hypervigilant right now, and I know where this comes from." This witnessing breaks the cycle of self-gaslighting, where you have been taught to ignore your own instincts and feelings to accommodate someone else's reality. Breaking self-gaslighting is a revolutionary act because it restores your trust in your own perception of the world. You begin to acknowledge that what you experienced was real, that the emotional instability of your childhood happened, and that it had a profound impact on you. When you stop denying your own pain to protect the image of your parent, you reclaim the power to define your own life and your own truth. This witnessing process creates a small but vital space between you and your anxiety, allowing you to react from a place of choice rather than a place of reflex. You are no longer just a passenger in your own survival responses. You are becoming the conscious observer who can decide how to move forward. This is where the light begins to break through, as you learn to stand as a witness to your own strength and your own capacity for change. Even as a high-functioning adult, you likely still carry the wound of the child who was never allowed to stop performing. On the outside, you may be the one who has it all together, but on the inside, you are struggling with chronic responsibility and the feeling that you can never do enough. This emotional suppression is a hallmark of the high-functioning wound, where you keep your own needs tightly controlled so that they never inconvenience anyone else. This survival pattern is exhausting because it requires you to be on duty at all times, even in your private life. You feel a constant pressure to solve everyone's problems and to be the emotional glue that holds your social circles together. The anxiety you feel is the fear that if you ever let go of that responsibility, everything you've worked so hard to build will fall apart and you will be left with nothing. Healing this wound means learning that your value is not tied to your productivity or your ability to keep everyone else happy. It means allowing yourself the grace to be tired, to be imperfect, and to have needs that you cannot meet on your own. You are slowly discovering that the world will not end if you take a step back, and that the people who truly care for you are there for who you are, not just for what you can do for them. Recognition of the legacy involves noticing the subtle ways the narcissistic programming still influences your daily life, such as the habit of breath holding or constantly seeking permission. You might find yourself checking in with others before making even the smallest decisions, as if you still need an authority figure to validate your choices. This is a leftover from a childhood where your autonomy was seen as a threat, and your compliance was the only way to stay safe. These ongoing patterns are not signs of weakness, but are the muscle memory of a long-term survival situation. You have been trained to prioritize everyone else's reality over your own, a legacy that can make you feel like a guest in your own life. Recognizing these behaviors as they happen allows you to gently challenge them, practicing the act of making a choice simply because it is what you want. By naming this legacy, you take away its power to operate in the shadows of your subconscious. You can begin to consciously decide which parts of your upbringing you want to keep and which parts you are ready to leave behind. This is the work of reclaiming your agency, moving from a state of permission-seeking to a state of self-governance, where your own voice is finally the loudest one in the room. The reparenting process is the heart of your healing, where you learn to give yourself the emotional support and validation that you never received from your mother. It involves speaking to that anxious inner child with the voice of a wise, compassionate adult, offering the safety and the limits that were missing in your youth. You are learning to be the protector you needed, the one who says, "I will not let anyone treat us that way anymore, and it is okay to just be you." This process requires a deep commitment to self-care that goes beyond just surface-level activities. It is about an internal shift in how you relate to yourself. You are building a new relationship with your own needs, learning to listen to them and honor them without judgment. Every time you choose to be gentle with yourself instead of critical, you are actively reparenting the part of you that was only ever met with harshness. As you guide yourself through this healing, you will find that your baseline of anxiety begins to lower as your internal sense of safety grows. You are no longer looking to the outside world to tell you that you are okay, because you are providing that certainty for yourself from within. This is the ultimate reclamation of your power, as you become the loving parent you always deserved and the steady anchor you were always forced to be for others. Shadow work is the courageous act of turning toward your pain and your grief with absolute honesty, rather than trying to outrun it. It means sitting with the deep sadness of the childhood you lost and the anger at the unfairness of being raised by a narcissistic parent. Instead of pushing these difficult emotions away, you allow them to be seen and heard, recognizing that they have a right to exist and a story to tell. Exploring your shadow also involves looking at the parts of yourself that you were taught to be ashamed of. Your anger, your selfishness, your vulnerability. You were taught that these traits were bad because they were inconvenient for your parent. But in truth, they are just part of being human. By integrating these shadow parts, you become more whole and less afraid of your own internal landscape, which is the key to quieting the anxiety of self-rejection. This work is not about staying in the darkness, but about bringing the light of consciousness into the hidden corners of your soul. It is through facing your shadows that you find your true strength and your most authentic voice. As you sit with your grief and your truth, you will find that the past loses its ability to haunt you, replaced by a deep and abiding sense of self-acceptance that no one can ever take away from you. In adulthood relationships, these patterns can appear in very concrete ways, such as the fear of being too much or the tendency to over-explain your every move. For example, you might spend hours crafting an email to a friend, worried that a single misplaced word will cause them to be angry with you. Or you may find yourself constantly apologizing for things that aren't your fault, a reflex designed to keep the peace and prevent the withdrawal of love you experienced as a child. Relational examples also include the way you might attract people who are emotionally unavailable or demanding, because that dynamic feels familiar and safe in its predictability. You might feel a sense of panic when someone is actually kind to you, wondering when the bill for that kindness will come due. These scenarios are not proof that you are broken. They are just the stages where your old survival skills are still trying to play their part in a world that no longer requires them. As you gain awareness, you can start to catch these moments and choose a different response, like deciding not to apologize when you've done nothing wrong. You can practice the terrifying but rewarding act of being honest about your needs and seeing who is willing to meet them. These real-world experiments are how you build a new life, one relationship at a time, based on mutual respect and authenticity, rather than performance and fear. We must ask ourselves the foundational questions. What did that inner child truly need that they were never given? They needed to be seen as a separate person with their own rights, and they needed to know that their feelings were more important than their mother's convenience. By identifying these missing emotional needs, you can begin to understand why you feel so hollow and why you are still searching for validation in the eyes of others. Exploring these needs allows you to see that your anxiety is often a signal that an old, neglected part of you is feeling threatened or ignored. You are learning to ask, "What do I need in this moment to feel safe?" rather than asking, "What does everyone else need from me?" This shift in focus is the beginning of a self-centered life in the healthiest sense of the word, where your own well-being is the foundation for everything else. Identifying these foundational needs is like finding the missing pieces of a puzzle that has been incomplete for decades. It gives you a roadmap for your healing, showing you exactly where you need to be more gentle, more protective, and more supportive of yourself. As you begin to meet these needs, the old patterns of anxiety lose their power because the underlying cause, the chronic emotional starvation of the inner child, is finally being addressed. Transformation occurs as you begin to embody new patterns of safety, where your boundaries are not just walls, but are the healthy limits of your own energy. You start to experience the world through the lens of authenticity, speaking your truth, even when your voice shakes, and trusting that the right people will stay. This is the emergence of a self that is no longer defined by what it can do for others, but by the quiet power of its own being. Safety starts to feel like a choice you make every day, rather than something you have to hope someone else will give you. You become more comfortable with the uncertainty of life, because you know that you have the internal tools to take care of yourself, no matter what happens. This new pattern of living is based on a deep trust in your own resilience and a refusal to ever disappear again for the sake of someone else's ego. This transformation is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real and allowing yourself the freedom to be human. You are learning that your boundaries are a form of love, both for yourself and for the people who are capable of a healthy connection with you. As you step into this new way of being, you are not just surviving anymore. You are finally beginning to thrive in the light of your own authentic presence. There is a profound consciousness that comes when we realize that the scars of our past are also the sources of our greatest wisdom. As the saying goes, the soul would have no rainbow had the eyes no tears, and your journey through the darkness of narcissistic parenting has given you a depth of empathy and understanding that is truly rare. This external wisdom reminds you that you are part of a larger human experience of resilience, and that your struggle has meaning beyond the pain. Including these relevant quotes and insights helps you feel connected to a broader tradition of healing and transformation. You are not alone in your journey, and you are following in the footsteps of many who have turned their wounds into a source of light for others. This consciousness allows you to see your life from a higher perspective, where the anxiety you once felt is transformed into a keen awareness and a deep commitment to living truthfully. By embracing this wider consciousness, you move beyond the role of the victim and into the role of the conscious creator of your own destiny. You are integrating the lessons of the past with the possibilities of the future, creating a life that is as rich and as meaningful as you are. This is the final step in the awakening of the self, as you realize that the very things that were meant to destroy you have instead become the foundation of your enduring strength. As we move toward the conclusion of this journey, I hope you can feel the shift within yourself, a small but significant turning toward the light of your own healing. If this exploration of the narcissistic legacy has touched your heart and helped you find a new way to understand your anxiety, I invite you to stay a part of our community. By subscribing, you are making a promise to yourself to keep prioritizing your emotional growth and to keep walking the path of reclamation alongside others who truly understand your story. We are committed to providing the guidance and the validation you need to continue dismantling the old programming and building a life of true peace. So please join us and let's keep moving toward wholeness together. Healing, ultimately, is about redefining who you are and reclaiming the identity that was stolen by a parent who couldn't see you. It is not about becoming someone new, but about becoming the person you were always meant to be before the world interfered. This reclamation is an act of justice for your younger self, a way of saying that your life matters and that your voice is worth hearing. This process of redefining healing allows you to see that your worth was never in question. It was only obscured by the fog of someone else's narcissism. You are learning that you don't have to be fixed because you were never truly broken. You were just deeply impacted by a difficult environment. As you reclaim your identity, you find that the anxiety that once defined you is replaced by a sense of purpose and a deep, abiding respect for your own journey. In this redefined state, you are free to pursue the life that you want, not the one you were programmed to live. You are no longer a performer on a stage. You are the author of your own story, and the ending is entirely in your hands. This is the true meaning of healing: the freedom to be exactly who you are, without apology and without fear. In this ending integration, you can finally feel the reconnection with your inner child, a bond that is now based on safety and mutual trust. You are becoming whole, no longer fragmented by the need to hide or perform, and this wholeness is the ultimate shield against the anxiety of the past. You have integrated the lessons of your upbringing into a new, more resilient self that can face the world with a sense of peace and integrity. Reflecting on this journey, you can see that the path from constant anxiety to emotional freedom was long and difficult, but it was also the most important work you will ever do. You have reclaimed your right to be, your right to feel, and your right to be supported by a world that once felt so dangerous. This integration is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a life lived in the fullness of your own presence. You are now a person who knows the value of their own soul and who refuses to ever let it be dimmed again. As you move forward, carry the knowledge of your own strength and the memory of how far you have come to find this peace. You are whole, you are integrated, and you are finally, beautifully and authentically free to live the life you were always meant to have. Looking back at the mountain you have climbed, you can finally see the beauty of the landscape below, unclouded by the fog of the past. The anxiety that once seemed like an inescapable part of you is now just a distant echo, a reminder of a war that has finally been won. You have moved through the origin of your pain, faced the shadows of your identity, and emerged with a heart that is both scarred and incredibly strong. This journey of healing is your greatest achievement, a testament to the fact that no amount of programming can ever truly extinguish the light of a human soul. As you step into your new life, do so with the confidence of one who has faced the dark and found their way back to themselves. You are empowered, you are integrated, and you are home at last in the safety of your own being. May you continue to walk in peace, knowing that the strength you used to survive is now the power you will use to truly live.